Okay, welcome to the Lovecraft eZine podcast. This is May the 10th, 2020. And Danielle Trussoni, am I saying your last name correctly?
Trussoni.
Trussoni is our guest today. Hey, Danielle.
Hi.
How are you?
I am great. How are you?
Oh, pretty good. Let's do introductions. Matt, let's start with you. You have a prize, right?
Yes. First of all, if you are a Lovecraft eZine movie night fan, next Saturday we are watching Sea Fever. So wait for the announcements.
Okay.
But our book today is a really nice hardcover copy of The Skinless Face by Donald Tyson. It's the limited edition. It is a gorgeous book. If you want to win it, send an email to ezineprizes@gmail.com and put Skinless in the subject heading. You may be the proud owner.
Put Skinless in the subject. What's in the box? All right, Mr. Langan.
Hi, I'm John Langan. I've written a couple of novels, a few short story collections. I have a new short story collection coming out in August. And I live to be Devil Mike Davis.
And Pete Rollick.
That's a fringe benefit, yeah.
Oh. Ha ha, ho ho, it is to laugh.
Someone resembling Pete is also here. Do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Pete Rollick, with my wife and kids shaved off half my hair.
Nice.
They left stuff in strategic places.
This is why I'm just letting mine grow. I'm not letting that happen to me.
So actually, we got the clippers in the mail. We ordered the clippers and we got them for the dog. And my wife's like, before we do the dog and really mess the dog up.
We don't care about messing your hair up.
As I said, they left for the week. So
we'll be back when it grows back.
Exactly. No, actually, I will tell you, it is really, really comfortable. And
yeah, that toupee, that's a comfort fit right there.
Yeah. And once the girls get back, they'll trim that up and
okay,
do something with it. I'll get some.
Well, I can give you some styling advice later if you want. So.
No, thank you, Patrick Swayze.
Rich. Yes. What? Sorry.
Yeah.
What?
No.
Go ahead.
I'm Pete Rollick. I've written a couple novels, a couple short story collections, and I've edited a couple books. And I watch a lot of bad movies, so you don't have to, like Sea Fever.
A couple meaning more than a couple. Rich.
Hey, I'm Rich Bunting. I envy Pete his Howard Jones haircut from 1983. And I have no hair, and sometimes I have a beard, but I have a library, and I've done none of the things these other guys have done. So,
yeah. Well, you have cigars, so yeah. Bridget.
Rich has an amazing library.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Bridget Brenmark. I'm a huge horror fan. I write music and do art, and I try to put all those things together. So sometimes I get some cool music boxes out of it.
Yeah, the Cthulhu music box. Is that what you call it?
That one, the tentacle one, yeah. And I just recently finished a Dagon design.
Yeah. Where can people get those to? Remind me what your website is.
Bridget-Brenmark.com. I also have a Facebook page, Dark Side of the Bridge, where I post those as well as my other weird art.
Okay. Bridget is with the TTE on the
yes,
end.
Matt has one.
Oh, yeah. Let me put Matt on the screen here. There you go.
And it plays music if you wind it up.
I thought Matt was having a seizure.
Well, these two things are not exclusive.
That's pretty cool.
No.
It's really pretty cool. You could even hide valuables in it, except if it was me, it's the first place I'd look. But,
All right. Well, I'm Mike Davis, host of this show, publisher, editor sometimes. I'm supposed to wish Michael DeBronzo a happy birthday. I didn't realize it was his birthday, May the 10th. So happy birthday, Mike. Also want to say before we talk to Danielle that on Tuesday night, live at 9 Eastern, the Thomas Brothers will be on at a special time, reading ghost stories. So, I figured some people anyway, might be bored during the coronavirus, and Jeff and Scott Thomas and I came up with this idea. So 9 o'clock Tuesday night, you can listen to them read ghost stories live and watch them read ghost stories live, or of course it'll be archived to YouTube immediately following, so whenever works. And then last thing I want to say before we talk to Danielle is, John, you and I were talking about this before the show, and I think earlier this week. Paul's got a book coming out, I think it's July 7th, called Survivor Song.
Paul Tremblay, yeah, sure.
Yes. And it's about some sort of epidemic or plague. I haven't read it yet. So
yeah, it's about a form of super rabies. I learned from reading this book that actual rabies, once you're bitten, it actually moves up your nerves a certain amount every day, which I find utterly horrifying. And once it crosses the barrier into your brain, you're done. You will live, but not much longer in a horrible, untreatable fashion. So anyway, Paul imagines a sort of souped up version of this, where it's the transmission or the time from the bite to the brain is hours. But the focus of the novel is on a pair of friends, a young woman who's pregnant with her first child. She's 8.5 months pregnant. And the novel begins, I don't think I'm giving anything away to say that the novel begins as this pandemic is ramping up. And Paul does a fantastic job, as I was saying before we started recording. He does a fantastic job of capturing how it feels, right now, or maybe if things were just a little bit worse, hard as that is to think about. And anyway, so one of his protagonists is a young woman who is bitten by one of the people who's been infected and is in late stage infection. And now it becomes a race against time. What can she prevent the infection from spreading further, and what about the child she's carrying? And she has a friend who is a pediatrician, and she immediately seeks out her help, and so the whole novel unfolds over the course of I don't know, like 6 hours, something like that, and it's really, really good. There's fine critical praise for you. Not bad, Tremblay. But no, it was, as I was saying to you guys, I found it actually kind of difficult to read about the first 50 pages, because I feel like he's so spot on in the evoking that sense of sort of panic and existential dread that we all have been, at least I've been feeling for since 2016, but especially since, the last couple months.
Yeah.
And and it just, it's, I really hate him. I hate him so much,
Well, we were talking about, just briefly, we were talking about the fact that I think I saw an interview with Paul where he's talking about that he kind of feels bad that it's coming out now. It just...
Oh, we were hanging out together at BossCon in February, and he got an email from, I think it was a German news agency or something. They'd gotten a copy of the book or something, and they said, did you write this with a coronavirus in mind? And, he was like, no, I didn't. I wrote this, a year ago, and this was just supposed to be a novel, not supposed to be, I'm sorry, Germany, for my terrible accent. But,
well, it's just funny because so many people, they seem to be watching these Netflix movies, like Contagion and, pandemic TV shows and apocalyptic TV shows.
Well,
So,
somebody told me, I mean, I know Matt was saying that he found Contagion, kind of distant emotionally. I haven't seen it yet, to be honest. I have the impression of what interested me is the people I notice watching it seem to be remarking on the kind of verisimilitude of it, that it feels as if it doesn't feel like 28 Days Later or something like
yeah.
that. I don't know. I haven't seen it myself, so.
All right. Well, let's talk to Danielle Trussoni. Hey, Danielle.
Hey there. How are you?
Thanks for coming on the show.
My pleasure.
Okay, so you've got a new book out, The Ancestor. But I'd kind of like to talk about just briefly your books in the order that they were published. For those who don't know you, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Danielle Trussoni. The Ancestor, which you just mentioned, is my 5th book. I began writing, my first book was a memoir, actually, about my relationship with my father, who was a Vietnam vet. And he was a tunnel rat in the Vietnam War. So, spent a lot of time, for those of you who don't know what tunnel rats did, in the south of Vietnam, there were kilometers and kilometers of tunnels in which the Vietnamese lived and sort of protected themselves from American bombing and from deforestation. My father, usually small soldiers, were chosen to go down into the tunnels and fight underground to, recover papers, to sort of do reconnaissance and that sort of thing. And anyway, my father did that during the Vietnam War. He came home, this was before I was born, and was completely traumatized, obviously. Most people who did that job died, and the ones who didn't were severely, wrecked afterwards. So anyway, that was my first book. It was a novel. I went to Vietnam, I went through the tunnels, and then wrote about the stories I heard from him growing up and about the tunnels. But, I think it's an interesting metaphor for me for the beginning of my writing career, because it was all about darkness and going underground and going deeper into something, but also about family. And then my next book was called Angelology, which was a novel. And that came out in 2010. And that one, it was sort of a supernatural thriller that, with a sort of what if question. What if the Nephilim, which is a hybrid of human and angels that are first mentioned in the Bible, were real?
Right.
And not only what if they were real, what if they had always existed here alongside us, and what if they still exist? And so I created this novel around that premise. Wrote about the history, basically did a lot of world building, wrote about the history of people fighting the Nephilim, the interactions with the Nephilim. And then, the sort of frontline story was a young woman who was a nun who had been placed into this convent as a child because she was going to be the one who could fight them. And then my next book was a follow-up to that. And then I kind of took a little bit of a left turn. I wrote another memoir about, about a relationship, about my marriage and divorce. And it was all in the south of France. So in 12th century Knights Templar commandery. So it was called The Fortress, and it was about that experience. And so the Ancestor is my return, I guess, to fiction after that book. And that's my latest. And that book is about a woman who takes a DNA test and discovers that she has a sort of monstrous family history. To just put it like, just a one-liner, the elevator pitch. That's what it's basically about.
I was researching, as I do when I haven't gonna have someone on the show, and The Fortress. I haven't read it, but I saw it on Amazon. Saw a couple interviews that you did about it, and it seemed like you were really putting yourself out there, and that it was, I don't know, maybe a cleansing sort of book to get you through some bad experiences. Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah, no, well, it's interesting because a couple of people have said, wow, that's the first horror memoir I've ever read, right? It's basically, it was a pretty terrible experience. Yeah, I wanted to write about it. I also felt that stories like that, people tend to not write them, right? Like there's a real tendency of people to bury bad, negative relationships in the sand and kind of go forward. And I just didn't want to do that. So I wrote about it. It is a very honest book, and pretty risky. It was kind of a bad career move, if you want to talk about career moves, because I had a good thing going on with my fiction, and then I wrote that, and it kind of, it was a long time before I wrote another novel. But yeah, I think
because you couldn't get into writing fiction again, or for other reasons.
Why it was so long.
Yeah, you said it was a bad career move, so just
because the people who were reading me for angelology were not as interested in a literary memoir about a bad relationship,
right?
And so I kind of lost some people along the way. I think, I don't know, maybe not. I don't know. It's hard to know. I just write what I need to write at the moment, and that was what I needed to write. So. But I'm very happy to be back writing fiction, to be honest. I hope I never write another memoir again. It's like if there's a reason to write a memoir, then something not great happened. So yeah, I would, I don't know. I think that because I'm interested I think there's some writers who like to use their life in their fiction, and I'm not that writer, right? If I have a story to tell that's personal, I would like to actually write it as a memoir or as nonfiction, and then save the fantastical and my interest in plotting and my interest in research for my fiction. That's where all of that stuff comes out. So I'm glad to be back doing what I like.
Well, before we go off that, I'll just say one last thing. I really like Mary Louise Parker interviewed you. And I really like this quote from you in that interview, I think it was. I would love for readers to finish The Fortress and feel that they have the power to change their lives. Bad things happen, but you can recover and be stronger than before. The day I decided to write my story was the day I began to transcend it. It is never too late to start over. So, yeah, that's great.
Yeah, that was a real impetus. The other thing is, I think, something that I also say, it's been a while since I've thought about that book, but the other thing I do say is that I think for a certain type of person, and me especially I was raised by a Vietnam vet who was really tough, and I ended up living with him. I grew up, from part of my childhood with him because my parents divorced. The idea of quitting, the idea of giving up on something is almost more difficult than enduring a bad situation, which is why some people stay at jobs they hate for years, or why they stay in a relationship they hate, or why they, there's this sort of like, I am not going to quit idea. And the minute that I realized that it's worse to stay in something that's miserable than quit and start over and just let it all fall apart and rebuild, was a really important moment. So I did want that to be in the book.
Yeah. Okay, well, let me yield the floor to, at the very least, Bridget and John. If anyone else has questions, please jump in. But Bridget, I know you've got some questions for Danielle.
Yes, I was reading the Ancestor, and I love it a lot. It's really hard to put down. So I had to put down close to the end for this podcast, and it's killing me. So
I won't tell you what happened.
Yeah, totally. But what I found really interesting about it is just how elegantly you write about some topics. And in particular, I think in horror, there are some things that for females in particular are kind of fear triggers. And that's not to say that males can't understand the suffering or that they don't have their own grief. But I think for females, there's almost body horror sort of trigger in regards to things like pregnancy and miscarriages and family history and just wanting your baby to be healthy and whole and normal. And I felt that you touched on those topics really tactfully and in a really graceful way. So I was wondering if you might elaborate on that a little bit about how you approach those topics and how you explored them in the book.
That's such a great question, because I'm extremely interested in the intersection of women and horror, right? And also the sort of origins of a lot of my thinking about women in horror is Mary Shelley and Frankenstein, and the idea of women being, I mean, the way that Mary Shelley looked at it, you know, a man created a child, and it was a monstrous child, right? So this idea of creation and who's creative, who can give birth to what, and also what are the repercussions physically. I think that there's a huge realm of underexplored female horror about body horror. I mean, if you want to just like, I like that term, or about just the, you know, the strangeness of creativity from a female point of view, and the horror of that. But for those of you who haven't read The Ancestor, what Bridget is talking about is there's a woman, the character, her name is Alberta Burt, and she has a history of miscarriage, and she has a history of not being able to have a child. And it's, you know, revealed throughout the book why, right? And it's a genetic legacy from her ancestry. But it has really serious repercussions on her mental state and her physical state. And I think that I think that it's, especially for women, as you say, it's something that we live with in a way that is not only not understood by half the population, but also that there's a kind of shamefulness of talking about it, right? So there, you know, there was a while where I was going through lots of novels and just looking for a mention of menstruation, you know, just a mention of it. And people just erase that huge part of, you know, the female experience. And if we're talking about horror, like that, this is body horror too, right? And reproduction, and just how actually kind of, you know, horrible it can all be to be living through it. Today I wrote a tweet about Mother's Day that I erased right away, because of course it was very dark, because for Mother's Day, for me, I think about, you know, there's 300,000 plus women who die every year in childbirth. And that's like over 800 a day. And that experience of the horrible experience of living with the reproductive and biological necessity of being female is really underexplored. And I'm very interested in it.
Even in 2020, it used to be much higher.
Much higher, of course. And, you know, and that's with medical intervention. And yeah, I mean, so it used to be, I think I looked it up, in countries where there is no medical intervention, it's 18 or 19% maternal death rate still. So if you think about that, like in nature, 1 in 5 women roughly would die having a child. So it's almost, you know, if you want to think about horror and suffering and human dispensability and what reproduction means and what it means for the human race, that a certain 50% of the population essentially is sacrificed to move forward on that sort of rolling basis every year, every day, whatever. It becomes it's a different way of looking at humanity and Homo sapiens, which is also very much a big part of how I approached The Ancestor, because you know, I'm very interested in the idea of sort of a global horror, like looking at Homo sapiens not as, or people, as something bigger from a remove, rather than the little compartmentalizations of who we are as, you know, race or country or what have you.
Nice. So yeah, in relation to that, you have a lot of discussion of science and evolution in the book. Have you always been interested in the various origins of humanity, or what kind of research do you undertake for that?
So I've always been interested, but I'm not by any stretch of the imagination an expert. So I did a lot of research for this book. I especially focused on the idea of hominids and the evolution of hominids. So there's a book called Sapiens. I think a lot of people has read that book, about sort of the long view of human evolution, and society's evolution with them. I was fascinated and kind of obsessed for a long time by the idea that 100,000 years ago, there were 5 different varieties of human beings living on the planet.
Me too. That's very fascinating.
Totally fascinating, right? And can you imagine, it's not a speculative thing. It's a real thing that those 5 species could have all evolved to the point where we are now. And we could be having different species of humans alongside us. I mean, that for me is totally fascinating. I spent a lot of time doing research specifically about Neanderthals. There was an exhibition in Paris at this wonderful museum that was all Neanderthal research. And they had like reconstructed bones, and they even had reconstructed the voice box of a Neanderthal, and they had speculated that they had language, and so they sort of mimicked what that would sound like. So I really get very into the research in a totally nerdy way. So I really did, I did a lot of research for this and had a great time.
Can I interrupt? Did you read the book The Third Chimpanzee by Jared Diamond?
I don't think I did read that one.
Oh, it's a fascinating look at like it's like Sapiens, but it's like from 10 or 15 years earlier. And it was like, what are the characteristics that make humans human? Right. Because, genetically, if you think about it, we're as close as some things in the same genus as chimpanzees. So like we as scientists throw organisms into separate genera, or we lump them into the same genus, but in humans, we've separated them out. Yeah. Whereas realize the chimpanzees, I think is like, its genus name, I think, is Pan, or maybe it might be Pongo. I don't remember exactly, but it could be Pan sapiens. Do you see what I mean? We could easily be grouped because by convention, their genus was named first. Right. And it's like, what is the difference between that makes humans human? And it's actually not a flattering self-portrait, because one of them is to consume the environment to the point where it can't support, to render other species extinct, and another is war. These are like, and this is where he came to his book Gun, Germs, and Steel, which is an overlong book.
Great book, though.
But he did that in a chapter in The Third Chimpanzee, and it's a much more compact argument. It sounds similar to what you're looking at, because I actually liked it better than Sapiens.
Yeah, I can't wait to read it. Thank you for the recommendation. No, I didn't see that. I wish I had before I wrote this novel. But what's interesting is that I did so much research. I had an extra 100 pages in this novel. This novel is about 360 pages. It was almost 500 pages when I turned it in. And my editor cut out a lot of that research, a ton of that research. And with me, I mean, obviously we decided together to cut it out. And I used a lot of that to write an audio drama called Crypto Z, which is about cryptozoology. And so, that I used it, but I did way too much research and put way too much in the book about, so it was hindering the flow of the narrative. So I took it out. But it's a fascinating topic.
Yeah, I want to get back to Bridget in just a second here, but I was going to bring this up since you did. Please tell us about the audio drama. It was so funny that you emailed me and said, I don't know if you like audio dramas, but I did this. And I was like, of all the people you could have emailed.
Yeah, no, I know. I didn't realize, but so I'm someone who doesn't like to waste my work or my research, and I had sort of hit this vein in the research about hominids and which led me to cryptozoology, which is, most of you probably know, the sort of science or faux science of animals that may or may not exist, like Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster, etc. Well, I got really interested in this idea of hominids being a cryptid or being part of that. And so I wrote an audio drama about two cryptozoologists who discover a hominid in the mountains, and they're going out to get it. And so there's a director. I wrote 10 episodes. The director took it, cast it. We have 15 actors, a sound designer, a composer. And it's just, I really think it's incredible. I can't take credit for how it sounds. I did nothing no part of that is mine, but I did do the writing.
Audio dramas are kind of like movies, you've got everything but eyesight on that or vision on that. And
Yeah.
So you've got people writing, you got people directing, you got people composing music and sound effects. So it's a team effort.
Yeah, huge, and it was a huge team effort, and we all did it basically out of just the love of doing it, right? It wasn't funded by anyone other than me and my partner, the director. And, it was just something we wanted to see if we could do. And I think it sounds great. So everybody should go out and just listen to the first episode. It came out last week. I'd love to hear what you guys think of it.
Yeah, I linked to it and the trailer in the show notes. So talking to the audience now. So you guys, feel free to check it out. You said you have one episode out now. Is that right?
One episode, but by the time, tomorrow is the next episode's dropping.
Okay.
And then there's 10, and it's every week.
Every week on Monday?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds great. I didn't get a chance to listen to it today, but I love audio drama, so I will be. So,
Yay.
And it's a really good thing with an audio drama and of course a movie when all that various talent in different areas comes together and it all clicks and creates something wonderful that one person could not have created by themselves.
I was astonished. My words totally transformed. Just the environment, having the music, it was amazing. You're right. I mean, I've written scripts before. Nothing has ever been produced. So this was like an opportunity for me to write 10 episodes that would be produced into something.
Yeah. Bridget, you have more questions? I'm so glad you're here because you got, of course, a perspective that the rest of us on the panel does not have. So.
Oh, I'm happy to be here. I have another question or two. So the mysterious inheritance motif is kind of a common horror motif. And as I started reading The Ancestor, I felt like I was very much in an old black and white movie, and it was very nostalgic and I loved it. But then you took it to a completely new place, an unexpected place. And I just wondered if you had thought at all, oh gosh, I'm writing, a mysterious inheritance book, and how do I get it to be something new, or if it just kind of evolved that way organically.
So the two things I knew when I started this book is that I wanted to have Bert, the main character, discover that she had a genetic legacy in a very contemporary fashion, right? What she does is she spits in a tube, like does a 23andMe test, and her name gets stored in a database somewhere, and she's found by this family that she didn't know she had. So that's super contemporary. That wouldn't have been able to happen 100 years ago. So I knew I wanted to do that, and I also wanted to discuss what I just was talking about, the long view of humanity and how we got to where we were, where we are, and how we're connected. It took many, many, many drafts for me to get it into the form it is in now, but I knew that was the journey. So I did, I love Gothic fiction. Some of my favorite writers are 19th century Gothic writers, Wuthering Heights and Jane Eyre, and of course, Mary Shelley. All of these sort of old foundational horror novels have always been inspiring to me. So, and of course, Rebecca, and novels like that. So I was very influenced by those books, and I did feel like I wanted to construct something that felt a little bit like that, almost Hitchcockian in some ways. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I love being surprised in a novel. If I can be reading any kind of novel, but a horror novel especially, or suspense, and somebody pulls the rug out from under me, I'm like, okay, good, thank you. Because I read so much that I don't want to see the same thing over and over. I've had a couple of readers be like, whoa, it's too different, right? Like it starts one way and then it goes into a different place. And I get that. But for me, I really wanted it to have that kind of quick twist that would just make you look at the whole thing in a different way.
Yeah, well, I say bravo because I love it.
I'm so glad.
It's very elegant. I know I said that earlier, but it's elegant in the Audrey Hepburn almost kind of way. But then there's also just this really cool modern twist, like you said. So I thought it was great. So really, just my last question is, what are your ideas moving forward? Any new projects?
So I have two projects I'm working on. One, I wrote about 100 pages of it and realized that it's probably a young adult series. I don't write young adult anything, right? Like all my novels are very adult. So I was like, whoa, wait. So I kind of set that aside, and I would like to do that, but I want to write. I have another horror novel literary horror novel that I'm working on now as well. So I started that a couple of months ago, and that's what I'm focusing on at the moment.
Is that the third in the Angelology trilogy?
It isn't. And,
Okay.
I get asked about that a lot. What happened with number 3 is that my editor left that publishing house, and they didn't want to do the third one.
Whoa.
I know. So...
But it's been so successful. You mean
I know it was really successful, but I don't know. You tell me. I don't get it. So what I'm thinking about doing is writing that and self-publishing it. I just need a moment where I have enough resources and time that I can just do that. So that's the plan.
Well, isn't Angelology going to be turned into a movie?
So the rights were bought, but. And there was a bunch of people involved, and then they didn't make the movie, so the rights returned to me, and I've been trying to set it up as television, and I actually had it set up someplace before the coronavirus, and it just all fell apart because of this. So I don't know. I mean, I feel like Angelology it's one of those things. People are still reading it. I still get royalty checks from it. It's a really interesting concept and story. It's just I have to find the right moment to relaunch it.
Well, we really are in a golden age of television, you might say, with Netflix, Amazon Prime, Hulu, where you can do these limited series, or you can explore. You don't have to turn a book into a 2-hour movie or an hour-and-a-half movie. You can explore more of that book and adapt more of that book for a TV series.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, there's many more options now. The thing about Angelology, though, is because of what it is, it will be expensive to make. So it's important to find the right people. It could be very bad if it fell into the hands of the wrong people. So we'll see.
Bridget, do you have anything else?
Nothing else right now.
Okay, well, shout out if that changes.
Definitely.
I saw an interview you did with Tor, Danielle. Here's the quote. This is about the Ancestor, I believe. There's a disturbing revelation at the end, so brace yourself. Some people, but not us, of course, are easily freaked out, and my book might not be for them. So,
yeah, this is what I've learned in my, book number 5. Some of my books are not for other people, or not for everyone, right?
Right.
And I think that the mistake that some younger writers or new writers make is they want to please everybody, and I'm just at this point where no, I mean, I write what I write, and I'm proud of it. And if it's not for you because it's dark and it has a weird twist, and then it's not for you, and that's fine.
Yeah. John, I think you have some questions for Danielle, don't you?
I do. Hey, first, happy Mother's Day.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And to you too, Bridget. So.
Oh, sorry, Bridget. I wasn't sure. I didn't know.
That's okay.
Actually,
we'll save the beating for later, John.
You can just add it on. That's
to your tab.
So I wanted to back up just a little bit. So how, I was curious to know, like, how did you come to writing? Did you always want to be a writer? And what led you into horror? I seem to recall that you went to the Iowa Writers Workshop, and when you went there, did you go there as a nascent horror writer? Was that something you discovered afterwards? What do you feel led you to where you are now?
So yes, I did go to Iowa. I started writing when I was 16, 17, but writing, very much just for myself. And my big influences as a teenager were writers like Edgar Allan Poe and Anne Rice, and of course Stephen King. And but then there was this other side of me that really loved writers who left the United States. So like I was obsessed with reading anything by any writer who lived in France or any writer who had moved to South America. I just really, I grew up in the Midwest, perhaps not in the kind of environment that people would think a writer, a nascent writer would grow up in. My parents were middle class, working class family. I was the first person in my family to go to college. But I was always from a very young age writing. And I think that the thing that really got me into it is that I had a very intense relationship with my dad. And I wanted to tell the stories that I had heard from him. So my dad died when I was 32. And I got a box of things that he had saved of mine. And in that box, there was a little tiny notebook of writings that little things I'd been writing when I was 12. And one of them was it's amazing, but one of them outlined a scene that I ended up writing in the book I wrote about him, my first book, decades later. Wow. So in my, if I look at it as a sort of holistic thing, I think that I taught myself to write so that I could tell the story of my relationship with my dad and what he went through. It was a very, literary story. It was literary memoir. And I was writing that when I got into Iowa. So it was pages from that book that got me into Iowa. At that point, and even now, honestly, I don't really think in terms of genre. Like I write what I'm attracted to write. And actually the industry has put me in different places. So with the first book, Falling Through the Earth was that book. It was, it was on the cover of the New York Times Book Review. It was one of the top 10 books of the year for the New York Times. It was, it was all over, and it was literary.
Right.
And then I wrote Angelology, and people were like, what the fuck is this? What is she doing? There was a review in Time magazine that said, Danielle Trussoni is a fallen angel for writing horror. Right. And I was like,
very nice.
Yeah, very nice. Thanks very much. I will say also written by someone who writes science fiction. Right. So it's almost our own, people who have these complexes in speculative fiction or horror who go after someone who, I don't know what. My first book was called one thing and this one was called something else. So
welcome to the ghetto.
What?
Right. Well, Niven talks about, this was happening in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
We would put ourselves into literary ghettos.
Yeah, right. And why do we do that? And we shouldn't do that. Because, this is another aside, but I've been a jurist for the Pulitzer Prize for 2 years. And the books that come to me for the Pulitzer Prize, which are so-called literary fiction, are often not as well written as the books that I'm getting for my horror column in the Times. Like, horror writers, speculative fiction writers are amazing writers. And I don't think they should be ghettoized. I think that they should be integrated into the larger culture. So anyway, that's I get really, very
Sure.
intense about that, because I think that we are, and it didn't used to be that way. The Brontes are horror writers. If so many writers that one time were just in the sort of main canon of writing would now be pushed like over here, and I don't know, I just don't like it. But so anyway, just to get back to your question, after Angelology, I kind of felt a little fed up too, right? Like with that, because I would continually be getting that question, like, what kind of writer are you? And so then I went and just to confuse people, wrote another literary memoir. And then now I'm back writing, the Ancestor, which I love, and I'm going to continue to write in, whatever inspires me, but that particular kind of book does inspire me.
Right. Well, you have to go where your imagination leads, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where it goes.
Yeah. What, one of the things that was fascinating to me about both the Angelology books, I haven't read the first memoir, but I've read the second memoir. But there's like I see these sort of fascinating continuities between the Angelology books and the Ancestor, in that there's this concern with like human development. So in Angelology, the idea is that there are these other creatures that can interbreed with us. So they are sort of human, but they've also had an impact on us as our civilization has developed over the the millennia. And there's something similar, or similar enough, I guess, for a kind of thematic thing going on in the Ancestor. And it seems that seems something that at least in those books, the three novels anyway, that is a kind of abiding interest of yours, the way that what it means to be human, and the way that we also develop. We were talking about this a little bit earlier, I suppose, with the evolutionary stuff that we were talking about. So is that something you've noticed yourself, or is that just one of those, hey, that's crazy? Well,
yeah, and especially now with Crypto Z, with the audio drama too, right? Like, because that's also very much in that same feel. Like, I'm interested in the mutability of what is human, what's monstrous, right? Where is that line in us between how we define the other and the animal and the human, or the mythical monster and the human? And I think it's a line that human society grapples with all the time. There are so many monstrous things in our world, and how do we morally and physically manage to sort of remain human, or pristine, when it's such a spectrum? So I'm very interested in that. I mean, I think those same questions show up in lots of different kinds of books, serial killer books, like where we're looking at how someone could do a monstrous thing and be human. It's the same idea. But I really love mythology as well. And I love the history of how we've incorporated or not incorporated stories to define our culture. And so, for example, with Angelology, many people, when I wrote that, were like, are you religious? Do you, is this a religious book? And it's no more religious to me than, if I were to be writing about a Greek myth, or the Ancestor, for example,
Right.
or I'm writing about the Icemen. For me, it's all part of our mythos as storytellers, and it's what I use to create those stories. And it's just what I'm interested in. I wonder if that will change. Maybe my next book won't be that.
Yeah, no. Well, what was fascinating to me too, especially since you were coming on the Lovecraft eZine podcast, is that some of Lovecraft stuff. Anyway, there's a short story. What is it? Facts in the Case of Arthur Jermyn. I think. Does anyone which is discovering that your family tree is not quite as human as you thought it was.
Yeah.
And of course,
Shadow over Innsmouth. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I was thinking of the hominid kind of thing, but
Right.
you're right. Yeah.
But I pointed this out before, is I always look at Arthur German as the first draft of The Shadow over Innsmouth.
Yeah, that's a fair point. That's a fair point. I was thinking of H.G. Wells too, with The Island of Dr. Moreau. What can we make something that is not human?
Yeah, and also, John, the what's human, what's not is, in addition, I think, very Philip K. Dickian.
Oh,
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah, and what was just, I mean, one of the things that was interesting to me was the way that you pick up on, sort of Gothic themes, right? The inheritance of the past, which is so much a part, Wuthering Heights, right? Or, but at the same time, it becomes, it's in this contemporary way. It's geneticized. That's the secret inheritance we all have. Because I thought, reading the beginning of the Ancestor, I thought, man, I'd like to find out I have a castle somewhere. Even though I knew that there would be all the upkeep problems and that sort of stuff, right? But like,
right.
It's like, well, we can't.
The heating bills,
Yeah.
I knew I was going to throw this into today's conversation at some point. So, John, I'll get right back to you. But here it is on what you just said. I don't know if you know this, but I married into royalty, so to speak. Danielle's ancestors, well, her maiden name was Wiedelsbach. So one of the I crossed a good line. I gained some points when we were dating when I could spell Wiedelsbach. But there's a Wiedelsbach castle in Germany where her ancestors are from. And I had her tell me a little bit about it today, and she's like, yeah, it's spelled just a little bit different way, but it's on Wikipedia. And I was like, God, there it is. So
watch out. You don't know what's lingering behind.
Yeah, so if any of you need to be knighted, let me know. So
The Knights of the Lovecraft eZine. That sounds like the worst movie ever. But also kind of the best worst movie ever.
It'd be almost as good as that genius movie that Matt loves, Big Ass Spider. So
you can't go wrong with the Big Ass Spider.
So I'm sorry, please go on.
Of all the spider movies, Big Ass Spider is the one that doesn't take itself the most serious.
I think Eight-Legged Freaks is pretty silly too.
I love Eight-Legged Freaks.
Yeah.
Next thing you'll tell me you don't even like Kingdom of the Spiders with William Shatner. It's just so disappointing.
Oh my God.
There's a new movie coming out, according to Bloody Disgusting.
Spider-Nado?
Huh?
Spider-Nado?
No, it's the headline was "They're tired of being stepped on." Flying spider creature feature flying spiders in the works. So I knew you'd be really happy about that, Matthew. So
Danielle's thinking, thank God I came on the Lovecraft eZine podcast. I could be spending time with my kids, but instead I'm listening to Big Ass Spider.
I have to tell you, this is like the best part of my day. I'm having a lot of fun.
Oh, thank you.
We try
to be informal and educational. So
I know I have a feeling you're going to get a call when this is over from the Pulitzer Prize people. They're going to be like, listen, I'm sorry.
It's over. It's over.
Or they're going to be like, you like Big Ass Spider too? We wanted to add that as a category.
On that, really.
That's true, right? Oh my God.
Matt's thinking, screw you all.
I'm still thinking about spider stuff. Maybe that should be your next novel.
I know.
Anyway, getting back to the guest.
Right? No, one of the things that fascinated me too, along with it was what Bridget had said as well, that just to pick up on that, the way that in the Ancestor in particular, I think, you really evoke, and this is again going back to the Lovecraft thing, you evoke these notions of sort of deep time. And the remoteness of the past, the remoteness of our past, of our human past, and also sort of geological past. And I thought that was really kind of interesting too. That it again, it's that sort of the sublime, right? It's the kind of the immensity of the world in which we live, and the immensity even of our own existence as part of this evolutionary chain that goes back however far it stretches back. So I think what was interesting reading the Ancestor, because I was really bowled over by the surprise too, and because at first it was like my childhood fantasy, right? I'm a princess in Italy, and then later on,
interestingly enough, that's Laird's too. He was telling.
Yeah, well, we fight over that fantasy, and but then I was like, wow, this is really daring. This is I think that was one of the things I responded to most in the book was we all feel, wow, I'd love to win the lottery. I'd love to get the inheritance. And we're Americans, so we're sort of suspicious of royalty, but we're also kind of infatuated with royalty. Like I'd like to find out I have a royal title, and not just by getting knighted by Mike. But then beyond that, then to find out that we're just taking a left turn. I thought that was such an amazingly daring move, because I had no idea. I think I felt the same way as Bridget, where I was just like, what? Hang on a second. Is she really going in this direction? And then it was like, oh, she isn't. And also, without wanting to spoil, Bridget, did you get to the part where the attack helicopters show up?
No, but go ahead.
I'm like, actually, though, there
are helicopters.
Yes, no, it's
remember there's the thing, right? There's the giant, and then the giant monster comes out. All right, yeah. But
I see people
that part is awesome.
This.
That's the best part of the book. But
the audience reading this, and listening to this weeks from now, going, "The Ancestor" by Danielle Trussoni. I'm going to read this, and then where's the helicopters?
Right, where's the attack helicopters? I thought there was like a giant monster at the end, but the ending I think is really daring as well. I think where it ends up, it manages to end up in this really difficult place, and I mean that in a good way. That you're just like, well, man, how are they gonna? Like I thought, could you write a sequel to this? Or what would the sequel to this look like because of where things end up at the end? So I don't know. Was there a question in that? It's like the thing people do at academic conferences, when they're like, "I'd like to talk for 5 minutes now."
I've seen that.
Those are called compliments. God.
Yeah. The proctor finally broke in and said, "Do you have a question?"
Right.
And the woman said, "I guess not."
Yeah, no, I was thinking about, but I was just thinking about the way that, like, structurally speaking, that the novel does all these kinds of daring things, which they sort of ally it with kind of Gothic tradition in lots of ways, but in this very 21st century kind of a way. And I think there's something interesting that happens in angelology in a similar kind of way, and that the fact that these angels exist is a problem. Like this is not, I mean, it seems to me at one point there was that rash of, Angels Among Us books, Michael Landon. And that was all, that was great. It was great that angels existed. And this book is like, no, they're not. It's this.
Yeah, they're evil. They're the explanation for everything that's going wrong. And it's funny because that book, when it was published in France, the title that they chose, it was The Curse of the Angels. And there was, some people that got kind of pissed because it's a very Catholic country.
Yeah.
And,
excuse me, Danielle, your volume went down a little bit.
Yeah. And so, anyway, yeah, it's true.
Your voice volume went down a bit. So I don't know if you moved away from the microphone or.
I didn't. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. It was just the volume decreased. That's all.
It's the angels. The angels are trying to interfere with this.
Hear that.
Right, exactly. Like, curse of the angels, this, Trussoni.
Well, they're not exactly nice guys in the Bible either.
Yeah.
No. So I've written a story called On the Far Side of the Apocalypse, where Los Angeles is the last bastion of humanity because it's the people that were left behind. And the angels were also left behind, and they're right bastards. And as Mike says, if you read the Bible, the angels are some of the most horrible things that appear.
Yeah, they're going around slaying entire cities, killing the firstborn, all kinds of things like that.
Yeah, the research I had to do for that story, really just made sure that I was never going to be Catholic. it just was not going to happen. There were just too many, horrible things perpetrated in the name of,
For sure.
yeah. So
I wondered, Danielle, a lot of your I would include the ancestor, not the ancestor. I'm sorry, the fortress in this. That a lot of your work seems to be really fascinated with Europe, and you talked about reading about people who went to France and such when you were a kid. Is that something and even taking the genetic test that led to that was one of the sparks for writing the Ancestor, to find out more about your heritage? Is that something? I don't know, what does Europe mean to you?
That's, you're the first person who's asked that, but it's a huge part of what inspires me. I think, people do various things to escape their childhood. And for me, it was getting very far away. And so after I graduated from college, I spent 3 years in Japan. I spent a year in England. I went to Iowa, then I spent 3 years in Bulgaria, then I came back, and then I moved to France. And I ended up spending 5 years in France. And so even though I didn't say this, but the sort of genesis of the Ancestor, another side of this, is that I myself took a DNA test and found out that I'm only 1% Italian. But I was raised by a very Italian American family. So it was like, what the hell is that about? But I was able to get an Italian passport through my Italian family. So I actually do have a European passport. And I got that because I wanted it. It took me many years to get it. I'm fascinated with being able to understand European culture. I don't know what it is. I'm really interested in the literature, the art. I like the difference, that I feel when I'm there. And I like coming back here too. But so yeah, I am quite fascinated with travel. Although I think that from here on out, I'm doing less of that because it really did interfere with my writing. Traveling that much,
Right.
I need to just sit down and write.
What are some of the positive things that you feel that make you feel positive or whatnot that when you go to Europe?
So I like that everything's old. I don't know.
I'm with you on that. Yeah.
That's just a very simple answer, but I like that. I like the sense that it's been there a long time. And I like, this might sound a little strange, but the fact that I often don't understand what people are saying makes me feel almost like, so when I'm in the United States, I feel weird around people and there's no reason why I should. But when I'm there, it's like, oh, this is a tangible reason why I'm different, right? Or why I feel weird around people. And I know that this a little bit, maybe that doesn't make sense, but there I'm definitely an outsider. I'm definitely a foreigner. I have a strong accent if I speak the language. And I kind of like that space, right? Of being both interested and fascinated with the culture, but being outside of it. And so I keep going back. I haven't traveled for 2 years now, and this is the longest I've just stayed put and haven't left. And I'm going to do that for a while because it's good for my writing. But yeah, I like that. I also just like the food and the wine. I just like the daily rituals that people have there. And not that you can't do that here. You can. It's just, it's more prevalent.
I don't know if anyone saw this. I believe it was 1991 Steve Martin movie, LA Story, where he's giving this European lady a tour that he's got a crush on, and He's like, some of these homes are over 20 years old. And she's looking at it, I'm like, okay.
It's so funny. It's hilarious. Yeah.
Do you remember that movie when he has to go for the interview at the French restaurant that he wants to take his date to?
Yeah.
And they give him the menu and they say, "What do you think you would eat?" Order. And he's like, the chicken. I'm like, you cannot have the chicken. Tell him what he can have. And it's
yeah, that movie's right up there with Roxanne and Steve Martin.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say Big Ass Spider.
No, Matt's gone now. We don't have to
torment him anymore. Okay, all right.
Anymore.
But there was a recent thing I saw. I think it was from Sam Edwards. With like Lovecraft is writing. It's like, oh, the ancient moldering house is over 200 years old, and the Europeans are reading this, and it's like, my shed is older than.
Yeah.
It's just.
There is though. There's something. I wouldn't say it's a huge trend, but it's something that I feel I've noticed over the last like maybe 10 years, where you're seeing writers like Victor Laval's novel The Changeling from a couple of years ago. The monster in that comes from Norway or Sweden, but there's this interesting move on the part of at least some writers to find the sources of horror rather than the darkest jungles of Africa or whatever stereotype. Instead it's coming back to I guess what the United States would think of as its principal cultural heritage from Europe, and looking in mom and dad's house, as it were, and finding, oh, there's some really scary stuff in there.
Yeah. I love that book. But I think for me, I just like to open stuff up. I mean, like I like the playground that I'm playing in when I'm writing to be as big as possible. Like I like to go back historically, if in some ways, like angelology, I think it goes all the way back to biblical times, all the way up to the present. The Ancestor, there's a journal or a diary from one of the characters that goes back to the early 20th century, and then again with another diary that goes back to the 19th century. I just like to open it up in different ways, and I think geologically opening it up to different places, besides just one location in the United States, has always been interesting to me.
Well, there's something fascinating about the way you treat the Alps. I guess because the Alps are in Europe and sort of central to, I don't know, doesn't The Sound of Music take place in the Alps? I honestly don't know.
In Austria.
Yeah, but it like I think of them as sort of domesticated mountains, if you will,
right.
which is just because they're familiar, that the name is familiar to me, and so one of the neat things that a book like I think The Ancestor does is to make them strange again, to estrange them, so that it's like, oh man, these could be pretty remote places, and all kinds of crazy things could be happening here.
Yeah, I mean, I was fascinated by stories like there was this. Have you heard of Otzi the Iceman?
Yes.
So stuff like that. Like there's this 3,000-year-old mummy that people find when they're hiking in the Alps. It's like, what? I like the idea that what's familiar can suddenly become very unfamiliar.
Right, and they do the autopsy of his body, right? Yeah. And they find the tattoos on him, and they find it looks like he was murdered. And there's food in his stomach. It looks like he had a good meal before he was murdered. He had
medicine in his bag. Like, really, I mean, 3,000 years ago, people were using herbal medicine. It's fascinating, and also that people, just normal people taking a hike, come across this, sudden confrontation with something a person that lived over 3,000 years ago. I mean, it's fascinating to me that we can be jolted. I think that's what it is. I like to be jolted out of my sort of routine way of thinking and jolted out of the expected and into the unexpected and the uncanny.
John, I'm going to sidetrack us for 1 minute.
Sure.
You mentioned
more spider stuff.
No, you mentioned you call the Alps domesticated mountains. Have you read about the tunnels they now have through the Alps? You can be the tunnel that they run from Germany to Italy. you don't even have to go through the Alps anymore. You go right underneath them. 3 hours.
Yeah. That I find kind of fascinating and also claustrophobically terrifying.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that would be terrifying.
And it's sort of like, and they're doing it, and it's like, oh yeah, we're in the middle of a blizzard in Germany, and then you're in palm trees 3 hours later.
Well, every now and again, one of those alpine tunnels, there'll be a horrible fire inside it, and that's really nightmarish, I find, because there's just no place to go.
Yeah.
I'm against it.
Not happening here.
But yeah, apparently, within the next 5 years, 4 more of those tunnels will be opening up.
Wow.
And just but Switzerland and a whole bunch of the other countries in the Alps just got fed up with road traffic about 15 years ago.
Sure.
And said, we got to nip this in the bud. So they started drilling.
See, I feel like there's a story prompt right there, right? What do they find as they're drilling, as they're excavating, right? It
reminds me of
right.
Gandalf in Tolkien's Gandalf talking about, what did he say?
The dwarves, they dug too deep,
right?
They mined too deep.
Yeah, found things that even Sauron doesn't know anything about. I'm paraphrasing this badly.
Yeah.
Something to that effect. Yeah, and Danielle, it sounds like correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you're kind of fascinated by the idea of deep time, in a sense.
Yeah, I think so. I think it horrifies me. I like to go places where I feel that I'm scrambling, right? The idea of another thing that also terrifies me is, looking up into space and imagining that void, this huge, enormous void. I think deep time, or the idea of nothingness, being at the other end of deep time is, it's something that I think about, and that becomes narratively interesting to me because it scares me.
Yeah, it scares, and there's a feeling of awe with it at the same time.
Yeah.
Deep time and deep space, different versions of the same thing. I mean, I've said this before on the show, and if my son were here, he'd be like, Dad, you're like an old grandpa repeating yourself again. But, what if modern humans, Pete, I think, or anybody here, I think, would know, I can't remember right now, but modern humans, about 200,000 years in their present form, more or less.
Yeah, pretty much more or less. Yeah.
More or less. But as Danielle talked about earlier, 200,000 years ago, there were 4, maybe 5 different species.
There were other variations.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, because the what do you call it? The hobbits, whatever we that group, they lived until 15,000 years ago, was it? Like I feel like they were, granted it was an isolated community,
right.
but they were in existence, it's still outside of recorded history. But
I think that was a fictional book, but I'll
that is real, Davis. Don't get me started on this again.
Hey man, you're talking to somebody who re-listens to that BBC audio drama twice a year.
Listen, I am the son of the true king, and we'll get to that. That's a next week's show.
All right,
I can't find anybody to reforge my damn sword.
Well, deep time, not only in the sense of humans. I mean, we look at where we are now and where we've been for the last 10,000 years, but that's only because of agriculture. Before we were hunters and gatherers, but somehow, as I forget the author's name says in Ishmael, somehow that's not important. We refer to it as prehistory, where human beings and other strains of human beings lived and died, loved their children, and so on, and not only that, but humans in general have only been around for just a very tiny percentage of the life of the earth. So
it's funny to me that one of the oldest pieces of writing we have, like from pre-Babylonian, is basically a letter from one person to another complaining that their order was wrong. It's a
Right.
little cuneiform tablet, and basically it's a customer complaint that everything you shipped me was wrong.
Pizza delivery or
Things
what?
don't change.
John, was it wood? I think it was a shipment of wood, wasn't it?
Are you implying I was there, Pete?
No,
Is that
but-
some kind of
You were there.
wow?
We were there.
Wow, that was yeah. I was yeah.
He's
Yeah.
I was like,
only
listen,
6
this is
feet, come on.
the wrong. It. No, but what what's fascinating in this regard too, right? Is an object. I'm obsessed with the Turkish. What would you call it? Ruins at Göbekli Tepe. These things that are older, like 5,000, twice as old as the pyramids. They're somewhere around 9,000 or 10,000 years old.
Mhm.
The scientists who were studying them, the archaeologists and such, originally thought that they were about the same age as the pyramids. And one of them said that pretty early on he had realized whatever the evidence was, they were twice as old. And he said he couldn't do that. He could, because that was a point when human beings were still living in the sort of hunting gathering phase. And the conventional wisdom was that these kinds of structures did not appear until you had a well-established agricultural economy and life. So the pyramids make sense in terms of how we understand human development. But the kinds of elaborate carvings that you find at this place, and there's another complex similar that's not too far from it. They don't make sense, and yet there they are, and they're astonishing and wonderful. But that's my obsession. Is I would love to go and see those things.
Yeah, I would love to see those too. That sounds amazing. I mean, a large part of you, I think you said you had looked through Angelopolis, or maybe I don't know if you read it, but that whole area, the Black Sea.
Yeah.
And, I have a character who's looking for Noah's Ark, and there actually have been reports of pieces of what they think are the Ark, and just archaeology of that whole part of the world is totally fascinating.
Well, there's if I want to say isn't it someone Ballard or someone was doing research there
that he went with the submarine.
And he thought that there's some evidence that there was some kind of a natural dam, an ice dam or something that broke and flooded all of this.
Yeah.
And maybe that's where we get that story, either that flood story from, or maybe there's something even further back that just disseminates out along with, the sort of movement of the Indo-European people. I mean, I think for fiction writers, right, it's just an endless source of fascination, but filling that stuff in. I'm sure much to the frustration of actual archaeologists who are like, no,
another novel.
Right.
Another, alternate history novel. Right?
I think though that, I had not read Angelology, but, this discussion of it, it's interesting because if you really look at the scholarly literature on, say, Nephilim, or on, say, the ancient cultures back then, if you asked somebody from that time period, and I'm talking during the Old Testament times, why the world is the way it is, they would have said, sure, the fall, right? But they also would have said, because of what happened in Genesis 6 with the Nephilim, right? And they also would have said what happened at Babel. Those are the three things, and those all include this kind of, at least all three of those include some kind of bad interaction with beings. Angel's really a job description. It's not a ontological description of a being. It's a job description. It's a messenger, right? But what it means is that we had some really bad interactions between humans and some other divine type beings that didn't work out in our favor and actually turned out really bad for us. And so it is fascinating when you look at, say, these ruins in Turkey, or say how old the Sphinx is, or because in ancient mythology, these beings, these Nephilim even, or even the angels that came down, were thought of as culture heroes. They called them Apkallu back then. They were culture heroes. And the Old Testament was reacting against that, saying, no, they're not. And by the way, Gilgamesh was considered a Nephilim. When you look at I want to say it was at Qumran. They found a book of giants. Gilgamesh was listed as one of the Nephilim, along with, say, Goliath and others. So, it's really interesting when you look at ancient Mesopotamian mythology, when you look at if you look at, say, Book of Enoch, or if you look at some other extra biblical texts, I think there's a story that needs to be mined that goes back into the depths, back into time, millennia back, that I don't think a lot of people tend to be familiar with, unless you happen to be a nerd and are ready to jump into that.
Yeah, that's why I wrote angelology, because I was that nerd.
Yeah.
Well, I will say that, so I downloaded, so I have the Ancestor. I'm about an hour and a half into it, and I listened to Crypto Z, which I absolutely loved. I did notice, here's one question I have for you, and this could be for any of the authors here, right? So looking at somebody who reviewed the Ancestor, from what I could tell, they didn't even review it. What they actually posted was, I refuse to read any more of Danielle's works until she finishes angelology.
Did somebody write that? Really?
Yes. So
that's actually a
is,
review that you can request Amazon remove, and I've noticed the last couple of years they've been better about that.
And
okay,
so,
I will, because the thing is it's not my choice to not write that book.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But that's the thing is that you have these, especially in genre literature, right? You have these fans, these devoted fans, and some of them can be really rabid, and they don't take kindly to you veering off that path, right?
Yeah.
If can you picture if, say, Sarah J. Maas or Leigh Bardugo did some kind of a crime thriller instead of kind of YA, supernet, elf, whatever it is, that kind of thing that they write, that there was a really rabid following.
Could you picture Rich Laird Barron? He writes horror and cosmic horror and so forth. What if he started writing crime fiction?
Yeah, right. How many? I mean,
Wait, he did that
yourself. Yes,
he did.
Right.
That.
And Danielle, you said that you lost a few people along the way, right? So my question is, as an author, do you feel like at times that you have a fan base that kind of paints you into a corner, and you find that you don't have enough space to be the author you want to be, to write about what you want to write about, because you feel like you have some kind of an obligation, because you still want to pay the bills, right?
Well, so yeah, I mean, I learned that the hard way, right? Because I was just so used to doing whatever I wanted. I wrote a memoir, and then I'm going to write 2 books, I don't know, horror / speculative fiction adult novels. And then, okay, I'm going to go back and do a literary memoir. And it was like a rude awakening, because I went from selling, hundreds of thousands of copies to I sold 2,000 or 3,000 copies of that memoir. So like, that's the difference, right? And to hear you say that there's someone saying, I'm not going to read any more of her books until she writes Angelology 3. Well, I am going to have to self-publish it, right? I can't get away from it. I get people writing to me weekly asking for that book. So I just have to find the ability, the resources, and the time to be able to write it. But I've learned the hard way that actually, I need to stay a little bit in a lane. I always say, no, I'm not going to choose lane, but I think, John, you hit on this. All of those books most of my books, even The Fortress, have something in common, right? Like it's not like I'm a different person writing totally different themes or different books. But I think you're right, with genre readers, there's a reason Stephen King has been so successful, because he gives the same book in a different configuration every time, with the same tone, the same kinds of characters, the same, more or less. Some of them are different, of course, but, and I think that I like to be creative and to go off in my own direction, but I'm going to be more conscious of that.
I think there's a balance there, because you have to be true to yourself as well.
Yeah,
and it
but
sounds
it's
like
true
you've
also
been
that
doing
I think, I mean, you were right when you said you also have to pay the bills. So, I lived for, I was lucky enough, because of Angelology, to be able to not have to worry about that for a while. But it's 10 years now. And now I have to maybe sell some books.
Do you know though, what's funny, just anecdotally, that book was such it made such an impact on publishing that I remember around like 2012, 2013, maybe even a little bit later, I was talking to my agent and I said, oh, I've got these two ideas for two books. And, one of them involves a vampire and one of them involves like a sort of angelic thing. And she said to me, you can't sell anything with vampires, but angels are hot right now. Get me your angel book.
Yeah.
If only I had,
I know. It's very strange. I have a lot to say about publishing too, just, the way that they do things. But that's another, we'll have
no, speaking of that, you also have another podcast, writerlypodcast.com. I believe that's right.
Yeah, so that was, for 2 years I did that podcast, and it's sort of on hold now because my, for various reasons with co-hosts and scheduling and stuff.
Right.
And that's just about the business of writing, so for people, basically I did it for people who are starting to write and have, maybe they've written some stories or they've written a novel and they don't know where to go with it. So it's really just advice about business.
Well, that information and those conversations are still out there. So I know that we have a lot of writers at whatever stage in their career that listen to this show. And check that out, writerlypodcast.com. So who was your co-host on that?
So the first co-host was this guy, Walter Kern. And then we had some problems where he couldn't do it anymore. And then it was an edit. I wanted to have someone who was more on the editorial side. So an editor and writer named Ponio Giannopoulos. And he was the second host. And now I'm contemplating if I should just do it by myself because I keep losing co-hosts. So I don't know. We'll see.
Like drummers and Spinal Tap.
Yeah, it's kind of like that.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions for Danielle? Danielle, can you give us again a spoiler-free synopsis of The Ancestor? Because that's a book that, even though it's your latest book, people can start with that because it's a standalone, right?
I think it's a good place to start. So it's about a woman who takes a DNA test, just one of those box kit 23andMe tests, and discovers that she has a family she didn't know about in the Italian Alps. And she goes there, and a lot of information is revealed about her ancestral connection to that family and something that's not quite human.
Is this in the same universe as Crypto Z?
It's so I took some characters from the novel and made Crypto Z out of it. So it is it's an adjacent universe. The main characters in Crypto Z that you just met, if you listen to it, are not in the novel. But that the creature is. So
I thought I heard a mention of the same Mont is it Mont Blanc?
Yeah, Mont Blanc. Yeah.
I thought that was mentioned in Crypto Z as well as the novel.
Yeah, the setting overlaps and some of the concepts overlap, but
different protagonists, right?
Totally different protagonists, totally different characters.
Now, let me ask you this, because I bet people are thinking about this right now. Should they read The Ancestor before they tackle the Crypto Z audio drama?
The thing is they're so different. You could do, you would not. I don't think. I mean, I would, if you're really, really worried about having no spoilers at all, maybe the novel first. But Crypto Z is really like an alternate universe. It overlaps a little bit, but it's really very separate.
Okay, that's good.
And I think you can enjoy it. You can enjoy it for different reasons, right? Like one, you can just put your headphones on and zone out, and the other one, not. It's not as easy to do that.
Okay, so Crypto-Z, you can just Google this. I'm sure Crypto-Z iTunes should take you right to it. And as I mentioned, it's in the show notes as well, the link to it as well. That's a nice trailer that you guys created for that.
Yeah, that's the director, Hadrian Rayo.
Yeah. I mean, the production is just top notch from what
The
I've seen so
production is
far.
insane. So this is something that I'm really proud of. The sound designer, they were inventing sounds, right? Every little sound was completely built up from the bottom up, and they didn't sample or buy sounds. They really invented all of them. So,
and all of you doing this for the love of it, not
all of us
getting paid.
doing it because we really want to see what we could do, right?
Yeah.
We could make this amazing immersive podcast. And also so the voice actors are really great. The voice actors that are in this, one of them is, an old veteran voice actor who's been in video games and stuff like that. And the other one is, she's amazing too. And she's been in a lot of stuff. So
it's not Wayne June, is it, the first one?
No, no, Jameson Price.
Okay. Well, yeah, as I mentioned, and as everyone who listens to this show hears me say probably too often, I love audio drama. I love old time radio. And I love the newer versions that, the internet has allowed, like what you're doing, audio drama. And I do love audio books too. I listen to them all the time. But there's just something about audio drama, graphic audio, which is a company that does superhero audio dramas and westerns and other things. Their tagline is a movie in your mind, which I think really sums it up. So
Yep. Yeah, I agree. I love them.
So I want to see if I had anything else here. Being on the outside talking with you, it seems to me that you've become very successful in the conventional sense. But leaving that aside, I guess, first of all, do you feel that way? And secondly, I'd like to ask each writer at the end of these, if I remember, what's your version of success? You were talking about doing these books and this audio drama because you really wanted to do them.
Yeah. So it's interesting because I think when I first started writing, I had like goalposts, like I would like to have an agent, or, I would like to have a book that's a bestseller, those sorts of things. And what's really transformed for me in the last couple of books, actually, ever since, I think when I decided to write The Fortress, knowing that it was outside of that sort of bestseller track and knowing what I was doing, and writing a sort of smaller, more literary book, is that now I'm interested in challenging myself as a writer. I want to see if I can do it, right? And I want to see, so for example, with the Ancestor, I had a sort of, I have a baby crying in the background.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, holler if you need to go.
Oh, okay. So sorry. I went with the Ancestor. I wanted to, explore, as you put it, deep time, and talk about, this sort of long vision of history. But I wanted to do it through the lens of one woman. And I had a sort of limiting set of apparatus around what I was doing, like with third person narrate. It's in first person, right? Everything's told basically from the point of view of this one character. In Angelology, it's third person, and it goes all over the place. Different characters, different times, this and that, and it's this panoramic experience. That was a real challenge to do that, but I also thought it would be a real challenge to narrow it to one character and see if I could do it. So that was the challenge there. In audio drama, yes, like the challenge was to see if we could make this immersive, amazing audio experience with not a lot of money and just talent. So I think that what it's become is, obviously we all need to survive, but for me, what success is doing something I haven't done before. And I really love impressing my readers. Like, I want my readers to be excited about what I'm doing. I don't want them to be like, oh, it's the same,
Yeah.
I want them to feel like there's a progression, that they're learning something with me as we go along together.
I mean, not to disparage, and he's very successful financially, but Dean Koontz, for example, it's the same book over and over in a sense.
Yeah, and
there's always a dog and these perfect protagonists. Everything's black and white, either evil or good.
Yeah. And people love that. Readers, some more lazy readers really love knowing what they're going to get every time. And that's why, those people, I was just doing this sort of look at the bestseller lists, occasionally I look at them. And it's basically what you find on there is there's 2 debut novelists that, probably the publishers have pumped tons of money in to buy those debut novelists, and the publicity was all pushed. Or it's people who have been there for 25 or 30 years who write the same book over and over and over. There's, there's very few surprises. And, I still believe in originality, and I still believe in surprising myself as I'm writing. So that's, I guess, my definition of success. I mean, of course, I'd like to have conventional success too. I don't see those things as opposite, but, I do believe that, for writing and literary culture to be interesting, and for me to be interested in it, it has to be different. It has to be unique.
And like a lot of things in life, it's about balance. You want to write and be true to yourself, what you write. Also, it's nice to put food on the table as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And I'm not going to write well if I'm struggling, to pay my mortgage or to eat. So
a little stressful.
Yeah, it's stressful. So, well, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see where it takes me. I have no idea. The coronavirus thing hit right when my book came out. And so I don't think sales are great, but we'll see.
Well, it's been a month since the Ancestor came out, and I looked at your Amazon ranking today, and I thought, well, she's still doing really well.
Okay, I haven't looked. Those are the things I don't look at because they'll drive me crazy. And that's why I'm surprised when someone said there was a review that was like, I'm not reading anything. I will get that taken down. But I try not to, I don't go on Goodreads and I don't go on Amazon, but because I get very obsessive. I get really obsessive about stuff and I can't control those things. So I'm not going to go there.
Yeah. So it's wise to avoid it. A friend of mine, a writer friend of mine, who's extremely talented, got upset about a review one time. And I said, what's your favorite classic book? And he told me what it was. I don't remember. I said, go to the Amazon page for that book. And I guarantee you that's a great book, but there will be 1-star reviews.
For sure.
And that kind of put it into perspective for him.
Right.
So.
Yeah. There's always going to be people out there who do that. So
yes,
better not to see it or to care.
Right. Exactly. All right. Well, is there anything we didn't think to ask that you'd like to mention?
I mean, you guys, this has been really fun and such great questions. I'm so excited to, see people that I know only from online, like you and John, and nice to meet you in person.
Yeah. Thanks. So sorry you had to meet Langan, but
Yeah, I don't know if I'll get over that.
Son of a bitch.
Okay, every time you come on the show, John, I'm so happy to see you. Seriously.
Every time I get done with one of these shows, I have to up the dosage on my medications. That's all I'm saying.
On your depression meds.
And I'm just like and by medication I mean scotch. But
so you have plenty of scotch, but I'm almost out of lithium.
I'm just saying.
God.
That's why my family left.
You gave yourself that haircut, didn't you?
I did. This is my taxi driver haircut.
There is no family. There is no family, Pete.
Not anymore.
There's just you. There's just you.
You scared them away.
We're in a you're right.
They
We're in
think
a taxi
you're the
driver
Frankenstein
moment.
monster now.
Yep.
So all right. Well, thank you so much, Danielle, for being on the show.
Thank you. Have me back sometime.
I'd love to. I think you're going to get even more successful than you are right now, and hopefully I'll send you an email at that time and you'll say yes. I remember you back from way back when.
Oh,
I've got 3 films under my belt now and I'm a millionaire, but sure, I'll let you interview me.
Okay, we can do that. I have a deep time memory, right?
Oh, good. Yeah, me too.
So
All right.
Just
Well,
to be clear, Danielle, I'll tell you that that review was on Scribd. So I'm going to respond to that as soon as we're done. I'm going to engage with that person, and I'll say that's not fair. Yeah. So I'll engage on Scribd with
thank
that
you.
person.
I so appreciate it. God, that makes me relieved that I don't have to do it, because I hate it.
No, I'll fight the good fight for you, ma'am.
You know, I always tell my son, even if you were Superman flying around saving people, somehow somebody would find a way to criticize what you're doing. So you just can't please everyone. So you got to be kind to others and at the same time please yourself. So
yeah, and once you learn that lesson, whether it's with your writing or with just your life, things go much more smoothly.
Oh yeah.
In general,
I read it, I was like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't care. So
yeah, exactly.
Well, we're going to talk about a few other things for about 10 minutes. So you're certainly welcome to take off and take care of your child, or
yeah, I might, because I heard some crying back then.
Sure.
Back there, and I might have to go see what's happening.
No problem. I think you just close this Zoom window and it'll kick you out of there.
Okay, bye guys. Thank
Bye.
you so much. It was
Thanks
great
so much.
to meet you.
Yeah, so her book is The Ancestor, folks, and by Danielle Trussoni, Trussoni. And yeah, pick it up. It's a very good book. And that I have not read The Fortress, you guys, but did one of you read that?
It's really good, but it's intense. I mean, it's about the disintegration of a marriage, and it's she doesn't spare herself.
It's not fiction.
Yeah, it's but so you can write a memoir where you are selective, I guess, in the way that you present things, and
my lawyer calls that lying.
Yeah. And it's a pretty brutally honest book. I mean, the funny thing is, it's a brutally honest book, but there are some ways in which the place still sounds really beautiful. It sounds like this terrible thing was happening, but at the same time in this beautiful place.
I'm going to show it to my Danielle. She might be interested in that. So
she might get some ideas.
Yeah, you want to be careful about that.
That's true.
That's yeah.
It's been 25 years, but it's not too late for her to dump me.
Well, I mean, you guys were married when you were like what, 16 or something. So I mean, she's still got plenty of time.
25,
she.
You know what? I'm originally from Texas, grew up in Iowa, but my family, they're all like, they married when they're 16, 17. My cousins.
So you waited till 17, and they were all like, "Oh, old man, what are you doing?"
I waited till I was 25.
Good Lord, they must have thought you were like grandpa.
Yeah, you're never gonna find anyone, you loser. So yeah, she was talking about first person versus third person, and in recent years, maybe I'm just not noticing it. I don't know, but I've noticed some books that alternate in chapters.
Yeah.
And I find that interesting. I guess there's stories in which it needs to be told that way.
The Poisonwood Bible is told from 3 different viewpoints.
Well, all the way back to Bleak House, at least, probably before that. But Dickens tells that part of the narration is from the point of view of one woman, and then the other narration is this kind of roving eye that can just go wherever he needs it to go.
Yeah. All right. A couple things. Have you guys seen a movie called The Enemy? I guess I'm really interested in doppelgangers. Doppelgangers.
Oh yeah, the Dennis Villeneuve movie. Jake Gyllenhaal is in it, playing himself.
Yeah.
It's messed up, man.
Is it good?
Yeah, I thought so anyway. The ending, yeah. I don't want to say anything about the ending, but the ending.
Okay. Well, I think I might have something to. I like to wind down after the shows and watch something. I might watch that.
I'm not sure if that's your wind down movie, though. Like Big Ass Spider might be more a wind down movie. You know,
For
Maybe
me,
you
it's
should
probably
watch
a wind
Midsummer
down.
before.
No, man,
goodness.
nobody needs to see Midsummer. Come on.
I'm not seeing Midsummer. I
Ooh,
heard
you
there
don't
was
need to
body
see
horror in
Midsummer.
it and
It's.
stuff.
I don't hate it in the violent way that Paul Tremblay hates it, but I just think it's. Come on, there's better films you could watch. There's a wonderful low budget New Zealand horror comedy called Deathgasm. Except they pronounce it Deathgasm or something like that. It's about a heavy metal band, like a adolescent heavy metal band that summons a demonic entity.
Yes.
That sounds amazing.
It is great.
That sounds like, what was the one from the 80s with Skippy from Family Ties, where he was a heavy metaler and there was this rock band that committed suicide, or that they were Satanists. Oh gosh, Skippy from Family Ties was the star of it.
That rings a disturbing bell. A slightly off-key
It's
bell.
not 976 Evil.
No, it's not that. It's from about the same time, though. It's from about the same time.
Well, this is the kiss of death. Kelly Young is watching live, and he says, "I wholeheartedly second Deathgasm." So
the man is a man of extraordinary insight and taste.
that's true too.
It's absolutely. There is a scene that so I'm watching this with my 17-year-old because he's really gotten into watching horror movies. And it's funny because when I was his age, although I read horror, extensively, I always had a harder time with movies because like I couldn't control what was on the screen, So anyway, so here we are watching this movie. And there's a scene when they try to avert the demonic apocalypse. It happens. We're going to have to reverse it. And the possessed, there's mass possession, and they're all kind of like super rage zombie things. So our hero and his sort of sidekick, or co-hero or whatever, go back to the hero's house where he lives with his very, very conservatively religious family. And he and his buddy, of course, his parents or his guardians are possessed, and he and his buddy wind up in their bedroom looking for something to defeat, to fend off his very religious, very self-righteous guardians with. I don't even want to tell you what the things that they use to defend themselves with. Maybe you can see where this is going. It is, and here I am with my 17-year-old watching this. We're both cracking up, and he's like, "I don't think we should show this to Mom." And I'm like, "Yeah, probably not, buddy." Probably.
Oh, you don't live in my house. My 17-year-old, something will happen, and my wife will go like make statements like, "Yeah, that's what she said," and I'm like,
"Wow,
oh my god, really? Oh my god."
Richard, Trick or Treat.
That's the one. That's
a great movie.
Trick or Treat. Yeah.
No, it's not the one you're thinking.
It's not the one with the little guy with the mask. Not Trick or Treat, but
Trick
Trick or Treat, right?
Well, I haven't seen that one then.
That
it just reminded me of it just reminded me of Knights of Badassdom. Have you guys seen that? That's amazing movie as well.
Yeah.
Similar oops, we conjured a demon sort of movie.
Okay,
never mind. I can't even say. Never mind. Just watch Deathgasm.
Well, I read an article. Excuse me, my voice is going. Mike Flanagan is writing a film adaptation of Stephen King's Revival.
Cool.
The article I saw said why.
That ending is possibly the most horrifying ending of any book I've ever read. I think I read an interview a few years back where Stephen King's like, "I don't even want to talk about this book. I don't want to think about it."
Yeah.
It's funny though, isn't it, that every few years, he said the same thing for a long time about Pet Sematary. This is as bleak as I could go, and every now and again he just. Yeah. I've been doing the audiobook of Doomakey, which I had missed out on, and it's a fantastic audiobook, and I'm like, I'm really loving this.
Please tell me I turned you on to this, because I'm always.
You did actually. You did. I was in a used bookstore, and I saw the complete audio book, 18 CDs for $6.
Wow.
And I was like, Mike Davis really likes this. I should pick this up and give it a try. And it was I started it back when I was still commuting to my job. So I had like about a 40 to 45-minute car ride one way every day. So I just started listening. It was so much preferable to listening to the news. So I just started going through Doohickey. And although there were wonderful sunny things in it, that ending, man, that's bleak. That book goes to some really, really dark places.
I think that book is really underrated, and you enjoy the journey with the character. I mean, a lot of the time he's walking through his house or painting or whatever. Nothing's essentially happening, but you're still interested in reading it.
Well, it's about it occurred to me that one of the things you find, maybe not in all of King's books, but King is very interested in friendship. And I think that's something that may be a major kind of theme in a lot of his later work anyway. I'm not sure about the earlier stuff exactly.
No, with it and Salem's Lot.
Yeah.
Stand By Me.
Yeah.
Body.
But he's also, very interested in the idea of how tragedy forms permanent bonds of friendship.
Yeah. Yeah. And also how tragedy, like in a book like Pet Sematary, tragedy can come out of friendship. If Judd hadn't told him the story, hadn't shown him,
Right.
That ending to Revival, I guess I have two questions about this. Number one, three. Is Mike Flanagan going to go through the whole list of Stephen King books that are left and direct them? Yeah, because he's directed quite a few now. But I'm wondering about the ending. Is he going to go Hollywood on it? Because that is one dark ending. And I've really enjoyed several of Mike Flanagan's movies. I mean, I think Absentia is genius.
Yeah, it's a good one.
But
that has a rough ending, Absentia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hush that I like. Hush.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the movie took a downturn in Hush when the guy took his mask off. Because it was less frightening then. The unknown factor. I mean, you knew he was a human and all that, but still, there's that emotional factor there.
I'm split on it. I kind of agreed with you when he took his mask off. There was a little part of me that was like, "Ah," but then there was another part of me that, like, I don't know how to put this. I like the thought that he wasn't like mythologizing the guy. Do you know what I mean? Like he's just so it's not like the shape or the face or whatever. No, he's just some sick fucker.
Yeah, he's just
he's just going to get, he's a human being, and he's not going to keep coming back for sequel after sequel.
Well, and the other thing is, and I mean no disrespect, but a couple of Mike Flanagan's endings have not been very good. Like Haunting of Hill House was a great series up to the last 45 minutes or so.
I'm still thinking that one over. I don't want to spoil anything for anyone who hasn't seen it, but there were some maybe color hints. If that doesn't sound too, maybe that probably sounds obscure enough. There were some color hints that ending may not be the ending we think it is.
Right.
Yeah, I've read that.
You don't believe it though, do you, Davis? Do ya?
I'm not sure, and it just seemed to have this upbeat ending that it didn't deserve, that wasn't earned, maybe. So,
well, for me, the more serious question is, why make an adaptation called The Haunting of Hill House that's not The Haunting of Hill House?
Right.
Like it's like a kind of remix, and I'm just not sure I see then, why do you even call it The Haunting of Hill House then? Why not just have these, The Haunting of whatever, or and you just have these characters who had these terrible things happen to them. But this is more than like God, what was the horrible? Was the Jan de Bont one with Liam Neeson and remember
Owen Wilson? Was Owen Wilson?
Owen Wilson, yeah.
Yeah.
Remember, if the house drops below 50 miles an hour, it's going to explode or something like that. And but I mean, like that was The Haunting of Hill House. And they were trying to like update it or whatever. So you still recognize the contours.
Go to hell, Grandpa.
Yeah.
It's the children. That's what's going on.
The other thing is if you're going to call it The Haunting of Hill House and borrow elements from it, the author was a male. And that struck the wrong note with me.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
You know, it seemed to me that to respect Shirley Jackson, the author should have been a female.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. There was
I've
no
been
reason
wrong
to change
before.
it.
I'm sorry.
There was no reason to change it.
Yeah.
Didn't add anything.
I mean, if you wanted to do this, you just could have called it, I don't know, The Haunting of Emily Rose, or, The Haunting of Hill House or Hell House. There was plenty of other ways that you could have just.
Well, they wanted to capitalize on Shirley Jackson and Hill House,
But I guess the family was okay with it. I mean, I guess I look at it that they're all still, her children are all still alive, and if they signed off on it, then I can respect their consent, I guess.
I don't know about that. The family's okay with the Spencer remake on Netflix.
You jumped the shark there. Okay.
No,
Spencer,
I didn't.
Spencer.
Yeah, Spencer. It's exactly.
Oh, Spencer. I thought you said spinster, and I was like, Shirley Jackson wasn't a spinster.
No, I'm sorry. My voice really is going.
Shirley Jackson's back, and she's packing heat.
This
She's
time,
there's no
personal.
Ghostbuster.
She's like, here we go, Stanley. Come on.
Laird and I were talking. That is not Spencer at all.
No.
Not at all.
No.
But the family signed off on it. I guess they liked the money, so.
Yeah,
whoever's in
people
charge.
like money.
Exactly.
Yeah, I hope if I kick the bucket and my family has the chance to make some cash off some kind of bastardization of my work, I would just say, go ahead, do it. Just take the money and run.
Well, it was Stephen King that said, no matter how bad the movies are, they can't change a word of what you wrote.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Right.
So,
What about, have you guys seen the not to leap off Mike Flanagan, but on just thinking about Shirley Jackson, this new movie, what is it? Is it called Shirley?
Shirley, yeah.
It's
I saw
the
the
sort
trailer.
of the biopic-ish film with, yeah.
that actress is really hot right now. She's doing some really meaty roles.
Mm-hmm.
I forget her name. I'm not good with remembering.
Is it Elizabeth Moss or no?
Yes.
Is it? Okay.
Yes. Yeah, that's it. But she's a great actress. Okay, I got a couple more things. Silence of the Lambs. This is
Cookbook.
from Bloody Disgusting. Silence of the Lambs sequel project. Clarice gets series pickup order from CBS. So interesting. I hope it goes well, because if it does, I'd be interested. If it's well written.
Well, the thing is, like when they announced the Hannibal TV series, I was like, oh my God, come on. And then it's this amazing work of art, the kind of thing that I just can't believe they showed any of on network TV. I know it was, edited in places and some episodes weren't shown, but still the fact that they actually allowed, was it Brian Fuller? Was he the showrunner? That they allowed him to do that makes me, because my first reaction is, oh, come on, Clarice. But then I'm also like, maybe, if you got people as good as that.
It all comes down to how well it's written, and does it, does it respect the source, the spirit of the source material?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I always held the idea that William Peterson, who starred as the protagonist in, was it called Mindhunter?
Manhunter. That was
the
a great
original
one.
version of Red Dragon, the television Red Dragon, the first adaptation of Red Dragon.
Yeah.
basically parlayed that into his character on CSI.
Yeah, I think so.
So it doesn't surprise me that you can go back to the source material and mine it for another FBI character.
Well, there would be something. I don't know if they have. I don't know how the rights are tied up for Hannibal, but in the sense of like the Clarice Starling character, it would actually be kind of interesting if you followed her, because when we meet her in Silence of the Lambs, she's pretty much a newly minted agent,
right?
And one of the objections, one of the reasons Jodie Foster didn't do the Hannibal movie was because of where she ends up there. And she said the person, the character I played would never make those choices.
Right.
And actually the movie changes the ending of the book. She doesn't make those choices. It would be really interesting to set her on that arc so that she winds up in that place at the end of that novel. That could actually, I think, make a really interesting film or series.
And last thing I have is Hereditary actor Alex Wolff. I don't know who that is. In talks.
Is he the son?
I think he's the son.
Okay. In talks for M. Night Shyamalan's next thriller. The only question I have is why. I mean,
well, M. Night Shyamalan is back.
Is he?
Where is he?
Is he?
Well, the Split movie was okay.
It was not okay in the slightest.
The Visit movie was okay.
No, Split. What was the third one? Glass was disappointing. Glass was horrible.
But it made money. So
it was still horrible.
It doesn't. All the Transformers movies were horrible. They made money.
I beg your, no, they were awful. I can't even do that with a straight face.
Movies.
Well, Shyamalan is just he has no. He's just so erratic. I guess some things. I think Unbreakable is a great superhero movie. It's one of my favorite superhero movies. And the Last Airbender adaptation, it still makes me like homicidally angry when I think about that film, and what a disaster that film was. So, Alex Wolff, good luck.
Yeah, Danielle and I watched Unbreakable in the theater whenever that came out many moons ago.
Yeah, it's about 20 years ago.
And I didn't really know anything about it. I just knew it was Bruce Willis and it was supposed to be a good movie. We went to it, and those first words, it's been a long time since I've seen it, but the first words about comic books at the beginning of the movie, before the movie starts, and I'm thinking, wow, I did not expect this. This is going to be great. And it was.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be a horror movie, and I was really, what it reminded me is in the 70s, when Channel 2, CBS, was trying to make all these versions of Captain America and the Hulk and Spider-Man, and they were trying to go like real life version, well, this guy turns into this big green Hulk, but he can like tip over a car. He can't like throw a tank or anything. It was like superheroes, but they were trying to make it, quote unquote realistic. And I thought Shyamalan did something like that, but in this really brilliant way.
See, I always think you mentioned it, that it's a really great superhero film, and I think it's a really great supervillain film.
It is.
Sure. Yeah.
It is.
It's disguised as a super. I mean and this is what M. Night Shyamalan does: is you think it's about one thing, but it's really about something.
The trees. Else. It's really about the trees, and you're like, the trees, really? The trees?
No, that one.
It's the trees.
Yeah, trees. No.
I just like love that Bruce Willis Unbreakable character so much that I felt kind of a sense of betrayal at the end of Glass. That this happened to him. So maybe that's my problem. It probably is, but
well, was that a setup for a Shyamalan universe? But
first of all, I don't think that character would have been fooled after years of doing superhero things. in a week or so of talking to this psychiatrist or whatever she was, wouldn't have had his mind twisted around that quickly. So.
Yeah.
But anyway, anything else, guys, before we go? Bridget, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Especially on Mother's Day. Pete,
Why do you always have to ask Bridget? You say thank you to Bridget. You never thank us. You don't even pay us anymore.
I just said Pete, and you interrupted me.
Wait,
Just
payment?
click on the trigger.
Money?
Wait. Oh shit.
Not as far as you know, John.
Son of a
I was about to say, Pete, thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you. It's just like I have nothing else to do. But
that's a great compliment. Thank you.
This was one of the highlights of my day.
Thank you, man.
He's just trying to tell you that's how bad his day was. This is one of the highlights.
I'm so sorry, Pete, if this is the highlight of your day.
It's okay.
And John,
he just came in here because he was hoping
you
would knight him. He was like, "Oh, I want a sweet piece of that German aristocracy."
That's right.
Things turned out so well for them.
Well,
No.
next week we have an author by the name of Leslie Lutz, who wrote a book called Fractured Tide. So check that out. Jeffrey Ford the week after. Matthew Bartlett on June 7th. F. Paul Wilson on July 5th. I've got a few holes to fill, and then we have a guy by the name of on August 23rd, a guy by the name of John Langan.
That son of a bitch.
Yeah, has a book coming out. Before we go, tell us about Children of the Fang.
It's my fourth collection. It's a big fat book. I wanted to do like a kind of skeleton crew kind of book, like one of those King books that had like a lot of different kinds of stories in it. I've been writing a lot of stories like over the last maybe 10 years. And I have this huge, like a kind of backlog of published stories. Like they've been out in anthologies or whatever, but they haven't been collected. And so I just decided I'm going to make a push. I know people are like, you should only have a collection out like every 5 years or whatever. And I'm like, at that rate, I'll be dead. So I just decided I'm just going to, over the next couple of years, publish a couple more collections of stories and just try to collect a few of them, and have them between two covers for people to ignore.
Well, I mean, if you're a fan of John Langan's short stories, this is something that you want. I mean, I don't think there is really any good rule about how often you should do a certain thing as a writer.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I love short stories. When Gemma Files did her 2 collections like a year or 2 ago, I was really happy. Supposedly she was going to have a 3rd collection out around the same time, and I was like, Gemma, what's going on? And she was like, stop bothering me. But it's like I was like, I won't leave the apartment until you get. But
I'm not going to read anything by Gemma Files until she releases the 3rd volume.
Exactly. What's funny is what that made me think of is there's a terrific zombie novel called The Reapers Are the Angels by Alden Bell.
Yeah.
And it's beautifully written. It's a hardcore zombie novel, but it's astonishingly written. And he wrote a sequel, and the sequel was only published, like he was just, I guess sort of taken with the world. The sequel was only published in the UK, and he has a 3rd novel in the series, and he can't find anyone to publish that. And
wow, I didn't realize there was a sequel.
Yeah. If you go to like Amazon UK, and you can find, I can't remember the title off the top of my head, but the Reapers of the Angels is it was up for the Shirley Jackson Award, and it was, sometimes books are up for awards and you think, what the hell is zombie? Oh, man. But then I read it and I was like, oh, I totally get it. This is amazing. So there's this 3rd book in this. And I keep hoping that like some small press or someone will just bring out the 3 maybe in a single volume or something like that. Those things do happen. Trilogies just kind of like stop, and it's not necessarily the writer's fault.
Well, I said something about something negative about Dean Koontz before, so I'll say something positive. I really appreciate this is like 22 years ago, something like that. He wrote a 2-book books. It was supposed to be a trilogy. And the protagonist is a guy by the name of Christopher Snow. And the first book was called Fear Nothing. The second book was called Seize the Night. I love these two books. I love these characters. And he never got around to doing the third one. So, I don't know.
So, many years ago when I was a book dealer, Lynn Abbey had started writing a trilogy for, I think, the Planeswalker role-playing books.
You said book dealer, right?
Yes, book dealer.
Okay.
Yes. And she published the first one and fans loved it. She wrote the second one, fans loved it. And then the great gaming debacle, everything collapsed. The market for everything just stopped. And she never got to finish the series. And people would come up to her and ask her, it's like, when's the third book coming out? When's the third book coming out? And she's like, media tie-in. There's no money there anymore.
Well, it's got to be Dean Koontz's preference because he's got pull.
Yeah.
So he's like the 6th highest paid writer in the world, something like that. Anyway,
and even today's guest about cryptids, Max Brooks's new book comes out next month, Devolution.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that looks
about
like
Bigfoot.
fun.
So
a Bigfoot massacre.
Yes. So if he can do for Bigfoot what he did for zombies, and Max Brooks is actually an expert in national security, looking at things from a 30,000-foot level. He's somebody that even in the Defense Department we listen to, right? He's come to speak to us before at the Naval War College and other places. But I'm really interested to see what he does with this, especially given the audio drama that I listened to from today's guest. So the timing is really good, I think.
It's about time. What's that movie, Willow Creek? It's about time for all of us to go back and have another look at that, right? Wasn't that the
Bobcat Goldthwait's books,
exactly?
Right? It was actually really well done. I liked it.
Yeah. No, it's a film that's worth watching.
So there's a writer who lives near me. He's a friend of mine, Dave Godsword. Writes some fiction, but he also writes some nonfiction. He does some biographies. He's just released a really large, well-researched book called Sun, Sand, and Sea Monsters. It's about sea serpents in Florida, and he goes through basically 300-400 years of sea monster sightings in Florida and essentially debunks most of them.
That's no fun. We don't want reality.
Well, and a lot of these were just easy because he would, instead of just relying on somebody else's research, he went actually back and did his own research and found the original article of that reported the newspaper articles and read them, and it's like, mistranslations move monsters thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of miles. Mm-hmm. And some things were just made up.
Reminds me of this book. When I was a kid, I found that one of the DAVs or whatever that my mom took me to on Saturdays. Sorry, Mom. The book saved me, though. But it was called Stranger Than Science. I think it was originally published in the 50s. I don't remember. But it really stoked my imagination. I was just fascinated by all these supposedly true stories. The internet comes along, and of course, I can pretty much debunk all of these. But there's still good story ideas. There's some real... You could really mine some good fiction from there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, so last couple things, if you guys will bear with me. Please remember, Children of the Fang and Other Genealogies. It's published by Word Horde. And you can go to Word Horde, and I think you can pre-order it.
You can pre-order it, and if you pre-order it from Word Horde, you get a signed book plate, and I'll do a little doodle on the book plate.
Oh, nice. So, yeah.
Awesome.
From Word Horde, I did not get a review copy to blurb or anything. Wow.
I wonder what happened there. I don't know.
I don't know. Tell you, but
Blurb for the Fisherman was really good.
I'm sure I told Ross to send you a copy, Pete.
Yeah. Sure.
Anyway, that sounds like a deal. Having John sign it and doodle it, whatever, instead of ordering it from Amazon. So
doodle it. Just let's make sure we heard that properly. Doodle it.
Yeah.
That's what I'm going to expect, John. It better be a good doodle, too.
Yeah, what is wrong with this book? Yeah.
Now you can Google this, or FYI, for those who don't know this, you can go to the Lovecraft eZine website and click on podcast at the top left, and if you scroll down a bit, then you'll see an always up to date list of guests that are coming up. And I hyperlink the guests. So if you click on John Langan here, it'll take you to the Word Horde page for.
It'll take you inside my house. You'll show up. You'll be like, "How did this happen?"
It will give you John's phone number and
bank account.
Yeah.
And once you stop laughing, you'll be like, "Well, I didn't need this."
Yeah. And we've got F. Paul Wilson on July the 5th. So that's a good thing.
That's exciting, yeah. So is Jeff Ford. Ford's a lot of fun.
Yes, yeah. And I just got an email back from Paul, and he said yes, he'd love to be on the show in June or July. So
let's ambush him. Let's totally ambush him.
I think we should.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Paul Tremblay. Let's talk about pickles.
Damn it, John.
Huh?
So literally last week, I asked my kids if they wanted to start learning how to pickle things.
Oh, that would be awesome if you just had a bunch of jars and you were like, you didn't say anything to Paul. You were just like, what do you think this is, Paul?
So I've been saving jars. I'm going to do it. I'm going to learn how to pickle things.
No, you totally should. You should pickle a copy of one of his books, or at least just take the cover.
Okay, I guess this is coming out now. I played a joke on Paul about 6 months ago. I sent him this like pickle pillow thing, whatever it is. It's like this little pickled doll, and sent it in the mail to him. And I don't think it said who it was from. It just said it was from Amazon.
It wasn't Pickle Rick, was it? From what do you call it? Rick.
Oh, it might have been.
He has a Pickle Rick toy that he's kind of like ambivalent about. Like he kind of likes it, but it's a pickle.
Yeah, that might have been it. I can look at my orders, but he never said anything about it online. So I'll be just like, he can wonder about it for the rest of his life.
Yeah, I've done a couple of like things like this with him, and every now and again he just like holds it up, and he'll just be like, it's Pickle Rick, So it's getting inside his head. Yeah, it's definitely in there.
Well, that's the goal. Last thing I'll say is, like with all of us, my TBR pile is through the roof, and I've finally gotten around to reading Laird Barron's first crime novel, Coleridge novel, Blood Standard. I am halfway through it. I love the hell out of it. And if you are one of those people who wish that Laird hadn't gotten into crime novels, listen, first of all, it's still Laird. I mean, it's
despite
everything
that,
you
it's
love.
worth reading.
Yeah. And the other thing is, without giving too much away, John knows this better than me, but it's sort of like the John Connolly books, I think, right, John?
Oh yeah, no, definitely. He's definitely this. This is a traditional crime novel. It has a kind of a twist at the end that's really cool, but not like in The Killer Was My Father. It does something really cool at the end. But the second novel, the second novel, he's on the trail of a serial killer, and it reads very much like one of Peter Straub's, like Coco or The Throat. And I haven't read the third novel yet, but he tells me, we talked about it as he was writing it, and he tells me it's basically, a horror story. It's basically like a weird fiction kind of a story. So, I kind of think, and from what he's told me, he may or may not write a fourth one, but that's the way the series is going to keep going into the sort of weird areas. So,
which is what Charlie Parker, the series, John Connolly's the author. It establishes this very real world, as Laird does in Blood Standard, and then slowly introduces horror elements in subsequent books. So I guess, and I'm going to be posting about this and so forth, but I guess I would say to you, if you're a Laird Barron fan and you've not read Blood Standard or the second one, which is Black Mountain, is that right?
Yeah.
You should. And the minute I finish Blood Standard, I'm going on to Black Mountain because this is great. So
You have Black Mountain?
do I have it? No, I'll have to buy it.
You want it?
Sure, I'll take it.
I think I have.
Can you sign it for me?
No. I mean, I could sign it, but
Yeah, just sign Laird Barron.
Just do the LSB that Laird does. No one will know the difference.
PSR becomes LSB. Nobody really.
Yeah.
I
So
think
anyway,
I think I
John.
came across a case that was abandoned, and I bought it all.
Yeah, I'll take it. Thank you. John, thanks for being here too.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. I really appreciate it. I love hanging out with you guys.
Well, I just want to say no pressure, but you're always welcome. So just let me know. So.
Yeah, no, definitely. I would be happy to as I said, to sabotage Paul and
Of course.
And Ford too. Ford's a lot of fun. Ford's yeah. I don't know what I would say to F. Paul Wilson. I feel like I'd be a little tongue tied, Hey, I like the
He's
keep.
pretty laid back. He's a nice guy.
How do you feel about the movie of the keep?
We asked him that the last time he was on the show,
and he hates it.
Yeah,
I'm sure he's never heard that question before, right?
Yeah, no, yeah. He's the one guest I've had. He goes, Mike, you have a really unique voice, and so it could be a really great compliment or not.
It irritates the hell out of me. Yeah, I'm a doctor. I've listened to all kinds of people with all kinds of throat conditions, people on the verge of death. But I hear your voice and I'm just like, oh, shoot me.
Yeah, it could be worse. It could be him. All right, everyone. Thanks for listening. Guys, thank you for being here today and for the great questions for Danielle. And we'll see everybody next week. Leslie Lutz is our guest. And again, the name of her book is called Fractured Tide, and it is available to purchase now. So, yeah, sorry about my voice. Remember the prize that Matt's giving out?
Someone's skin face prize. Or something like that?
Skinless face.
Yeah. I think that's actually a pretty good
novel.
Book.
It's a Lovecraftian novel by Don Tyson. It's in my to be read pile. Somewhere, yeah, down there.
All kidding aside, it looks very good. I haven't read it yet, but it looks great.
Yeah.
So, yeah, sorry about my voice, everyone. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next week.
Okay, see you, everybody.
See ya. Thanks, John. Thanks, guys.